today we are going to be using our calculator to solve for angles in radians. So for our first problem, we first need to get our trig function by itself. So we're going to divide by 5. And we have cosine equals -1/5. The reason why we're using our calculator is because 1/5 is not in our chart. And so we're going to have to work backwards and figure out what angle is going to give you 1/5. To do that, we're going to use our inverse cosine button. Again, we do not put the negative in here because the negative is going to tell us our quadrants. The reason why we're using the second cosine and not cosine is because we're not finding cosine of 1/5. We're trying to find cosine of what equals 1/5. So, because we're in radians, let's first make sure when you press mode that you are in radian mode, because we want our answers to be radians. Then let's go in and do second cosine 1/5. Again, no negative sign. And that gives us 1.369. We're going to round to the nearest 3 decimal places. And just like before, we want to use our negative sign to figure out when is cosine negative. So in our quadrants, cosine's positive in all and C. So that means we want the second and third quadrant. So just like before, we are going to be combining these two to get to our answer. Because we're in radians, however, we're not going to be using 180 degrees anymore. We're going to be using pi. So our first answer, if we start at pi and we're going in this direction, this is going from 180 to 90, so we're decreasing. So we want to do pi minus our angle, which is 1.369. Our other answer is going to be starting at pi again and going in this direction. So if we start at pi and we're going towards 3 pi over 2, now we're increasing, so we have pi plus, again, our angle, which is 1.369. So to get our final answer, we are just going to plug this into our calculator. So we want to do pi, which is second, and then the caret stick right below clear. So it's pi minus 1.369. Again, we're rounding to the nearest 3 decimal places, so we have 1.77, and then the 5 after the 2 tells you round up to a 3. And now we want to get our second angle, which is pi plus 1.369, which gives us 4.51. Again, we're rounding up because this 5 tells you that you're going to round the 0 up to a 1. So our two answers for number 1 are right there. For number 2, again, we first have to get cosecant by itself. So we're going to get rid of this 3 by subtracting. We're still left with a negative cosecant. 7 minus 3 is 4. To get rid of that negative sign, we're going to divide by -1, which just leaves you with cosecant. 4 divided by -1 gives you -4. So unlike in number 1, cosecant, notice there is no button for cosecant on your calculator. So in order for us to solve for this problem, we are going to have to flip it. The reciprocal of cosecant is sine. So when I flip 4, I end up with -1 over 4. The negative sign still stays there. And again, we're going to split it up. So we're going to use our calculator to find second sine of 1/4. Which gives us 0.253. Again, rounding. And because sine is negative, we know it is in the 3rd and 4th quadrants. So we're going to combine those to get our two answers. So our 3rd quadrant, this one, your angle is closest to pi, and it's going from 180 towards 270, so we know it's increasing. So we have pi plus 0.253. Our second angle this time is closer to 2 pi, which is the same as 360. And because it's going from 360 towards 270, we know this one's decreasing. So we have 2 pi minus 0.253. And that's going to give us our answers. So pi plus 0.253 gives you 3.395. And then we have 2 pi minus 0.253, and that gives us 6.030. So here are our two answers. Okay, let's do number 3. So your first step here is to get rid of the minus 1 by adding 1 to both sides. 0 plus 1 gives you 1. To get rid of this dividing by 5, we're going to do the opposite, which is multiplying by 5. Once we multiply, we're left with the 3 secant of theta equals 1 times 5 gives you 5. We're going to divide by 3. And now, just like before, we cannot use secant because it's a reciprocal. So we're going to have to turn it into cosine and flip our fraction. Once we have it cosine, we're again going to split into 2 parts. This is a positive. So we're going to use our calculator to find second cosine of 3/5. Which is 0.927. And because cosine is positive, it's going to be in the first and the fourth quadrants. So in the first quadrant, we're starting at 0 and increasing, so we're going to add 0.927. In the fourth quadrant, we're starting at 360 or 2 pi and subtracting 0.927. So let's get our answer. 0 plus 0.927 is just 0.927. 2 pi minus 0.927 gives us 5.356. So again, there are our two answers for this problem. Our last problem today, number 4, we are not going to use the calculator. This tells us it is either going to be on our chart or the unit circle. Whenever I say don't use the calculator, it means you're going to be using one of these two. Okay, so tangent squared of theta equals 1. First thing we want to do is get rid of the squared by taking the square root. And what we learned yesterday, or last week, is that whenever you take the square root of something, you actually get two answers, positive or negative. Square root of 1 is 1. So again, because it's already one of the main trig functions, it's not a reciprocal, we can just look straight here. Tangent of 1, we know is going to give us a reference angle of 45 degrees or pi over 4. Today we're only looking at radians, so we're only going to be looking at the pi over 4. Because it's positive or negative, this could actually be in any of the 4 quadrants. So we're going to use all 4 quadrants. So our answers are, in the first quadrant we have 0 plus pi over 4, which is just pi over 4. In the second quadrant, we know this side, which is pi, we can rewrite as 4 pi over 4. So if we are subtracting 1 pi over 4 from that, we end up with 3 pi over 4. If we're adding 1 pi from that, we end up with 5 pi over 4. On the other side, this is 2 pi, so 2 times 4 gives you 8 pi over 4. And then we're subtracting, because we're going from 360 towards 270, so that is going to give us 7 pi over 4. And these are our 4 answers. We have 4 answers because it could be positive or negative, so it could be in all 4 quadrants.